A newborn baby arrives into the world incapable of hatred. Yet history shows ordinary people can be driven to commit unspeakable acts against their neighbors. This transformation from innocence to atrocity is not a mystery of nature. We often describe animosity as if it were a natural disaster, an unpredictable storm that simply arrives and overwhelms a society. In reality, hate is a manufactured product. It is built, piece by piece, by exploiting the most primitive and vulnerable wiring in our psychology. To understand how an ordinary human heart learns to despise another, we have to look under the hood of this psychological assembly line and dissect exactly how an enemy is constructed. When we treat hate as a man-made machine rather than an act of fate, we can begin to see the specific steps required to dismantle it. The construction begins with our oldest survival mechanism. For most of human history, staying alive meant trusting your small group and remaining suspicious of outsiders. Evolution hardwired an instinct into our brains to divide the world into us and them. That instinct is incredibly easy to trigger. When researchers assign total strangers to different groups based on something as meaningless as a coin flip, it takes mere minutes for people to favor their own group and view the other with suspicion. This tribal division thrives on internal insecurity. When people feel frightened or powerless, pointing that pain outward at a target provides a temporary sense of control. It is easier to blame an enemy than to face a complex, frightening reality. These ancient tribal boundaries and our own personal fears serve as the unguarded raw materials that builders of hate exploit first. These materials ignite when a belief is tied to identity. If a group anchors its sense of reality in a specific worldview, encountering a different one feels like a direct attack. During the 1947 partition of India, neighbors living side by side for generations suddenly murdered each other over religious lines, leaving over 1 million dead. On a personal level, the process is accelerated by the grudge. When we are wronged, the human mind tends to replay the memory, deepening the resentment with every loop, until revenge. A single dispute can escalate into a self-sustaining cycle of bloodshed. The Hatfields and McCoys rivalry dragged 2 families into decades of murder, turning a private disagreement into a hatred passed down like an inheritance to children who weren't even born when it began. Children are extraordinary imitators. They absorb the sneers and the suspicions of their community long before they can understand the context, adopting the biases of their parents as naturally as they learn a language. When identity threats and inherited grudges are combined, hate ceases to be an individual emotion and becomes a self-sustaining chain reaction. To drive this assembly line toward mass violence, the builder must first disable our natural empathy. This happens through dehumanization. The target is systematically stripped of their individuality. They stop being people with families and fears and become labels, vermin, pests, or a faceless threat to the public consciousness. This is almost always an intentional strategy. Leaders have discovered that a population busy hating each other is easier to manage. This weaponization was demonstrated in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. In just 100 days, roughly 800,000 people were slaughtered by people they had known their entire lives. The violence was fueled by a relentless propaganda campaign that broadcast dehumanizing slurs over the radio daily, drilling hatred into the minds of ordinary citizens until their neighbors no longer looked human. These atrocities are not accidents of nature. They are the direct result of operators deliberately pulling the levers of a fully assembled machine. Because this entire process is learned, its outcomes are not a biological certainty. If a system can be assembled, it can also be dismantled. The same human wiring capable of engineering genocide is equally capable of reconciliation. We see this in the documented cases of people who have been taught to hate, but eventually choose to unlearn their prejudice. Disrupting this machinery begins with a pause. The next time you feel a reflexive urge to despise a group of people, ask a single diagnostic question. Who taught me to feel this way? And do I actually agree with them? Choosing to see the full humanity in a perceived enemy breaks the cycle of dehumanization. When the target is no longer a label or a pest, the psychological logic required for mass cruelty loses its foundation. This single choice complicates the narratives of those who benefit from our division.